Live from the 412, it's Platt's point of view, y'all. Let's go. Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Platt, and this is Platt's point of view. And on today's show, I have a very special guest joining me in the studio today. This guy was one of the first dual threat quarterbacks before people were even calling quarterbacks dual threats. One of the first quarterbacks in Division I history to pass for over 5,000 yards and rush for over 2,000 yards in his career. 1989 All-American, two-time Heisman Trophy finalist, two-time ECAC Player of the Year, College Football Hall of Famer, drafted by the LA Raiders. I'm talking about the legend himself, Major Harris is in the building. Thanks for joining me, man.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, I'm very excited to have you in the studio, and we're going to get right into it, man. Growing up in the Hill District, man, Elmore Square in the 80s, man. Tell me, how was that, man?
You know, it's funny. Well, I grew up on Bentley Drive. Then once I guess, went to college, we moved up to Elmore. So Elmore and Bentley was really the same thing. But the funny thing about Bentley Drive growing up was I remember late one night when I was young, Dr. J filmed that Fisher Say Pittsburgh on the basketball court down on Bentley Drive hoop court.
Get out of here.
Yeah, I remember that, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they had it lit up at the hoop court like it was daytime.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Wow. Was there a lot of pressure in playing football or whatever?
Well,
I was young coming up. There's probably a lot of distractions.
Well, I think what kept me focused was playing sports.
Yeah.
I go from football to basketball to baseball, so I really didn't have no time to really get caught up in the streets because I was always, caught up in sports.
You were active, yeah. That's cool. Your senior year at Brashear High School, you threw the game-winning touchdown pass, 79 yards on the last play of the game against Indiana High School. Talk about that moment, man.
You know what was crazy? That was really the play that I guess put me on the map as a football player. Mm-hmm. Before that, my goal was to go to college on a basketball scholarship. Football was just something I was doing. It was like, because it was in the season, football to get ready for basketball season. But it was funny. I remember we up at IUP. I remember they was beating us like 21-16. I remember the announcer was saying, Indiana, they 4-0, and next week we play such and such. People was leaving. And I remember dropping back, and then I rolled left. And I think when I rolled left, the defensive backs he can't throw it that far, that type of thing.
That arm strength.
And Tony Horn, he just kept running and caught the ball. You know
wow.
what I mean? Yeah,
like
that
some
was
old
huge.
Cordell Stewart to Michael Westbrook, similar to that.
Yeah.
Wow, that's what's up, man. You were Pittsburgh Post-Gazette High School Football Player of the Year your junior and your senior year, and named a top 100 prospect by the Sporting News. Talk about your junior and senior year as a quarterback for Brashear High School.
Well, like I said, after that play, I started to get letters from college. I'm like, oh man, maybe I can do something with this. But then, another thing, being a black quarterback, you never know what's going to happen with that. But I just started getting more and more publicity, and I wasn't really getting publicity in basketball. So I guess my priority shifted to, okay, I'm going to try to go to college on a football scholarship, and the rest is history.
Wow, that's great. Coming out of Pittsburgh, Pitt recruited you as a defensive back, which was a terrible decision. But what other schools was interested in you coming out besides West Virginia or whatever?
Well, one thing I will say about Pitt was going through a coaching change. They had Coach Foles Fazio. He ended up getting fired. So what happened a lot of times when you're being recruited by a school, then the coach get fired, that kind of mess up the whole thing of recruiting because
right,
now,
they want their own regime.
you don't know who's coming in. Even though Mike Goffrey came in, he probably was at another school recruiting other guys, and I don't know, looking back on it, if they wanted me as a D-back because, Foles got fired. So I really don't know. But a lot of people say that they was recruiting you as a D-back. They say the same thing about Penn State. But you really never know until you get there. But one thing that I decided on when it comes to recruiting or what school I'm going to go to is they already going to have a black quarterback there. So I basically narrowed it down to West Virginia and Arizona State.
Oh, the Sun Devils was looking at you? Wow, you would have went out west, man, played in the Pac-10.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, you redshirted your first year at West Virginia. The next season, you beat out former Jets quarterback Browning Nagel to start quarterback for West Virginia. How was it being the starting quarterback for the West Virginia Mountaineers as a young black male during them times? You know, West Virginia's a little, some people say it's racist or whatever. They're not too fond of African Americans, but now times have changed. But how was it back then?
Well, you know what? Like I said, we had a black quarterback before me, John Talley, and I guess he went through growing pains, and they ended up switching his position to wide receiver. Yeah. And I never got caught up in off-the-field issues. Once I'm on the field, I'm focused. I'm just trying to get the job done. Yeah. I mean, the thing about it is coming from a city school where you playing in front of, say, 1,000 people, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And the championship might be playing 3,000, to now you playing in front of 60,000, 70,000. Yeah. That's a big adjustment.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. In 1988, your sophomore season, you guided the Mountaineers to the school's first ever undefeated season. Later on that year, y'all played Notre Dame for the national title. On the third play of the game, you hurt your shoulder, and you guys lose 34-21. Talk about that year and talk about that game.
Going into that year, we knew we had a good team. The year before that, we played Syracuse, last game of the season. They was undefeated up at the Carrier Dome. And we took them down to the wire, almost beat them. And we knew we had the majority of our team coming back. So we knew going into that year that we had a good chance of, running the table.
The play versus Penn State. You forgot the play, but you made the most of it, man. Tell me what happened that day up in Happy Valley.
Oh, it's really two plays. Okay. Now, the play, as far as most people are talking about, is the play where we beat them, but that was in Morgantown.
Oh, okay.
But it was another play, if, did some research and stuff like that, where we played Penn State, up at Penn State, and it was almost like the longest yard play, where I went one way, rolled the other way, and rolled back the other way. They said you could have went and got a hot dog and came back, the play still was going on. I threw it to the running back. He took it down to the 1 yard line, but they called the play back because one of our linemen's foot was over the line of scrimmage. But if that play would have held up, we would have beat Penn State up at Penn State. But the play, as far as the play that most people talk about, we was playing Penn State, national televised game, and it was an option play. And as I'm telling the guys, get up to the line, you know what I mean? The 30-second clock is running down. I remember it was an option. I just forgot which way it was, and I just took it to the field. And I guess that's what they called the play.
Heck of a play, man. Man, they couldn't stop you. Your junior year, 1989, you led West Virginia to an 8-2-1 record. You finished third in Heisman voting, first team Kodak All-American, second team Associated Press, ECAC Player of the Year. But you guys lose to Clemson 27-7 in the Gator Bowl. After the season, you declared for the NFL draft. Talk a little bit about that season and your reason why you wanted to go pro.
Well, when I look back on it, now that I'm older, when you're older and look back on things, you can really dissect what you did. When I look back on it, I think the way I went about it as far as leaving college, I think was wrong, I'll be honest with you. I think I had an agent in my ear, too.
Yeah.
And when you're young, you kind of get influenced by, outside entities, so to speak.
Exactly.
And what had happened was the decision I made, I don't think it was a bad decision from the standpoint of a resume. We played for the national championship. I was up for the Heisman twice.
Right.
You know what I mean? And first team All-American. Based on a resume, you would think I would be a first-round draft pick. You know what I mean? But when I look back at it, the way I handled that situation, I would have to say I did it wrong because I just decided in my mind, I'm going pro, can't nobody tell me nothing. When really I probably should have sat back, and even if I'm going to go pro, I think I should have probably been more patient in going about it instead of just saying, hell with it, I'm going pro.
Any regrets not playing your senior year at West Virginia?
Well, being that I played as a freshman, most of the guys that I played with was graduating. So if I would have came back for my senior year, I was going to be playing with like a younger team, guys that basically just now starting to get their starting jobs because everybody, you know what I mean, from the time we played for the national championship then the following year, most of the guys that was playing was gone after that year.
Okay. There was rumors that you showed up to the NFL Combine in sweatpants and Timberland boots, man. What happened at the NFL Combine, Maze? Talk to me.
Well, to be honest, what had happened was the year that I came out, they had what you call the underclassmen combine. I think it was the first time they had underclassmen that declared, you know what I mean, for a combine. And I think it was like 38 of us. I remember it was like me, Emmitt Smith, Junior Seau, Andre Ware, you know, it was just a bunch of underclassmen. We talking about years ago, but it was just a bunch of guys that was there for the combine. And I remember when we went to the combine, I knew Emmitt Smith from being on the All-American team. So me and Emmitt was kind of tight, cool.
Okay.
Talked to him on the phone a lot. So when we got up there to Indianapolis, they said that we was going to practice indoors in a dome. And when it happened, they had a big monster truck thing, so now we got to practice outside. So I really didn't bring like jogging pants and stuff like that to practice outside. It was a little chilly. So the night that we got there, we did a physical, and then, me and them, guys was talking about, like, what y'all gonna do tonight, man? Going to the room, get ready for the combat. The next morning down at breakfast, Emmitt come up to me, what you do last night? I said, man, I ain't do nothing. I was in the room. He said, oh, man, he told me that, several of the teams got together and they took out a lot of the players out to eat. Come to find out, all the teams got together and took out all the players. I was the only one, really, that didn't go out to dinner with a team. So right then and there, I kind of knew that, maybe I ain't gonna go high in the draft or what have you. Then one of the GMs, Gio Coherent, I forgot his first name, he was a GM for the New Orleans Saints. He said, my brother really wants you to come up Canada and play for him. Okay. So I knew right then and there that my chances of going high in the draft and everything probably was slim to none. So now that, I'm hearing all that, and then we got to go out and go out and test. I'm like, man, I ain't gonna catch a cold out here. So I basically, being that I only came with shorts and stuff, I basically, ran. But here's the funny thing about it was, it's true what I did, but it was other guys like Jeff George and them. They didn't even practice. At least I did test out, even though I might have been wrong and testing out in jeans and stuff, but I tested out. I could have just said, man, I ain't gonna do nothing, you know what I mean? But when I look back, that's one of the things, like I was saying before, when I look back, I kind of regret doing, but when you're young, you know what I mean, you do different things.
Right. You was drafted by the LA Raiders, but chose to play in the CFL. Why?
After I got drafted by the Raiders, I go out to the mini camp. I said, well, the agent was saying, well, 12th round, we still probably try to make the team. So when I go out there, that was my intentions, to go out there, go to mini camp, and, hopefully, can make the team. But when I got out there, as soon as I got to the facility, they said, you got to go up to the coach's office. He want to talk to you. At the time, the coach was Art Shell. So I go up to his office, and he said, come and sit down. And he said, me and the big guy talked, and we want you to go up Canada for a couple years, and then we're going to bring you back. So I knew right then and there, they wanted me to go up to Canada. So even though, I practiced at minicamp, but I knew I was going up Canada. And the following year, they drafted Todd Marinovich.
Wow.
Who came out a year earlier than me. So I knew I wasn't going, go back down to the States and play for the Raiders.
Okay, in the CFL, you played for the British Columbia Lions. Tell me about your experience playing in the CFL, the Canadian Football League.
Well, it was a different experience, being that they got 12 guys on the field, steady 11. And what had happened was the BC Lions is the team I ended up playing for.
Right.
But the Toronto Argonauts had my rights. Okay. So what had happened was they called me, and I took a visit up to Toronto. And when I went up there, they showed me a good time, but then they traded me out to Vancouver. Wow. You know what I mean? So it was funny. I found out about getting traded on an airplane back home to Pittsburgh.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Crazy feeling.
Yeah.
You played 3 years of Arena League football from 1991 to 94. You played for the Columbus and Cleveland Thunderbolts. And then a few years later, you played in a couple indoor football leagues. Tell me about your experiences playing in both of those leagues, man.
Well, it's funny. Arena ball is definitely different from Canada. It's smaller. I'll be honest. I got to the point where basically I was just trying to play football. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I didn't really see a future in the NFL. and I'm still kind of young, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm basically like, man, let me just, play football, get a paycheck, and keep it moving. It was more of that type of thing.
November 6, 2021, West Virginia University finally retires your number 9 jersey, which is long overdue. But how was that feeling, man? How did that feel that day?
Well, it was surprising, based on the way my career went, you know what I mean? It was probably a sweeter situation as far as getting your number retired, because really, if I was a betting man, I wouldn't think that. You know what I mean? Just based on the way my career went. You always think in terms of guys getting their jersey retired, especially in football. They had to play in the NFL. You know what I mean? So for me not to have really an NFL career, and then the way my career went up Canada arena ball, I would never expect, you know what I mean, that I would get my jersey retired. So it was probably a more sweeter feeling, just that they had that done, because like I said, that was definitely something that I was shocked, shocked, that it happened.
That's great, man. Who was the best player you saw when you played in the CFL?
Well, I played with Doug Flutie.
Oh, he's tough.
And after I signed, they signed Flutie. Now, the one thing about Canada, it's a different game, so it's an adjustment. And Flutie, it took him really a season to adjust to, playing up Canada. But I would have to say Flutie. Flutie, I mean, after that year, he went to Calgary, man. And
he tore it down. I used to watch them games on ESPN too. He was tough, man.
Definitely.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Any regrets not playing in the NFL, Mage?
Well, it wasn't my decision to make. You know what I mean? I mean, it could have been a situation where, I'm pushing the issue or trying to push the issue to get in the NFL. But, when you look at it, you're a black quarterback, you get drafted in the 12th round, regardless of what you do, it might not be in your cards. Now, it was a little different with Warren Moon. He went up Canada, came back and things like that.
Jeff Garcia,
too. Yeah. But, from a black quarterback perspective, you really don't see that too much.
Right, definitely, man. Who was the best player you played against in college?
There's a lot of good players. When I would watch film, I never would get caught up in like, oh, that's such and such or that's such and such. You know what I mean? Once we get on the field, I notice the number, like, man, you know what I mean? This dude is making big plays. But if I would have to say one guy that stands out is Chris Billman. I remember when I was a freshman.
He used to play for the Lions.
Yeah, we played Ohio State.
Yep.
And I remember he was like a student of the game. I remember, and it's wild because when I look back on it, it's like, damn. He picked up on the way my cadence, you know what I mean, how I call play. I remember we had a 4th and inches, and I remember it was going to be a quarterback sneak, and I remember he jumped over the center. And
like a LeVar Leach, before LeVar Arrington. Wow.
Yeah. So I would have to say Chris Billman stand out.
Yeah, he was pretty good. What's Major Harris up to nowadays, man?
You know me, golfing. That's my thing.
Wow. All the older athletes love golfing.
Yeah, I'm out there every time I can get out there. I'm real big into like fantasy football,
me too.
Fantasy basketball.
Me too.
But yeah, I would have to say that's my thing now, golfing.
Do you still coach North Hills wide receivers?
No, I never coached here. It was something I guess was on Wikipedia, but I coached up Bashir. I never coached at North Hills. It was something.
They got to change that.
Yeah, they had it on there, but I never coached there.
Okay, man. We're going to go into my final thought on Major Harris, y'all. In the early 90s, the pro game just wasn't quite ready for Major Harris. He was way ahead of his time, probably about 35 to 25 years. During those times, Major just didn't fit with the NFL way back then for whatever reason, which is ludicrous. NFL GMs and head coaches, they failed to realize the benefit of not making a good quarterback fit an offense, but making the offense fit a good quarterback. Major Harris had a knack for turning a bad play into a good play, a very unique skill that NFL teams crave. The NFL just wasn't ready, and they missed out big time, and it's a shame, man. But I want to thank my guest, Major Harris, for joining me, and that'll do it for another episode of Platt's Point of View, and we'll see y'all next time.
CJ on the